You've sentenced 41 people in your career. 41 verdicts. 41 moments where you looked a human being in the eye and told them what their life was worth from that point forward. And you never lost sleep. Not because you didn't care, but because you were careful. Because you read every file twice. Because you believed, genuinely believed, that the system, when handled with discipline and integrity, arrived at the truth. That belief kept you upright for 22 years. Tomorrow it dies. Because tonight, at 11:47 p.m., sitting at your kitchen table with a glass of water you haven't touched and a manila envelope you were never supposed to receive, you realize that one of those 41 people is innocent, and his execution is scheduled for 6 a.m. You don't panic. Not yet. Panic is for people who don't know how systems work. You know exactly how this system works. You built parts of it. You've defended it in op-eds. You've mentored young attorneys and told them to trust the process. So your first move isn't to call anyone. Your first move is to read it again. Every word. Because there has to be a mistake. Not in the verdict, in the envelope. There isn't. Let's go back 8 years. His name is Marcus Hale, 34 years old at the time of the trial. Convicted of first-degree murder in the death of a convenience store owner named Gerald Pitt. The case was clean. That's what you remember most about it. In 22 years on the bench, you rarely saw a case that clean. 2 eyewitnesses placed Marcus at the scene within the window of the killing. His fingerprints were on the register. A partial DNA match tied him to a jacket found 2 blocks away. His alibi, that he was at his girlfriend's apartment, collapsed when she recanted on the second day of trial, visibly shaking, refusing to make eye contact with the defense table. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty. First degree. With a sentencing recommendation of death. You handed down that sentence 8 days later. You remember the way Marcus Hale looked at you when you said the words. Not with rage. Not with tears. With something quieter than either of those things. He looked at you the way a person looks at something that has already happened. Like the verdict wasn't a decision. Like it was weather. You told yourself that was the look of a man who knew what he'd done. Now you're not sure what it was. The envelope came through your clerk. Addressed to you personally. No return address. Inside, a USB drive, a printed lab report dated 6 weeks ago, and a single handwritten line on an index card. It reads, "They knew." 2 words. You don't know who sent this. You don't know how they got your home address. You don't know yet who they is. But the lab report you do understand. A private forensic lab, accredited, legitimate, the kind that handles wrongful conviction appeals, ran a full DNA analysis on the jacket. The partial match that helped convict Marcus Hale came from a secondary transfer. Someone else's DNA was on that jacket first. Someone whose profile is in the national database. Someone who was already in custody for an unrelated crime at the time of the original trial. The lead prosecutor on the Marcus Hale case knew this lab had flagged concerns during discovery. There is an email chain on the USB drive that makes this very clear. They buried it. It is now 12:14 a.m. You have 5 hours and 46 minutes before Marcus Hale is administered a lethal injection in a state correctional facility 40 miles from where you are sitting. Let's be precise about what you know. You know the DNA evidence used to convict him was, at minimum, misrepresented. You know at least one member of the prosecutorial team was aware of a challenge to that evidence before the trial concluded. You know that challenge was not disclosed to the defense, which is a direct violation of Brady v. Maryland, a constitutional obligation the prosecution has carried since 1963. You also know what you don't know. You don't know who sent this envelope. You don't know if this is real or if it's an elaborate fabrication designed to discredit the conviction at the last possible moment. You don't know if Marcus Hale committed this murder independent of what the jacket proves. Fingerprints at a crime scene. 2 eyewitnesses. A recanted alibi. None of that disappears because one piece of evidence may have been tainted. And you don't know. And this is the one that keeps pulling your eyes back to the clock. You don't know if you act on this tonight, what happens to you. Because you are not Marcus Hale's attorney. You are the judge who sentenced him. The judge who read that clean case file twice and handed down the sentence with confidence. If you make a call tonight and it turns out this evidence is manufactured, planted by someone trying to reverse a legitimate conviction. Your career, your reputation, your entire legacy collapses overnight. You know how this looks. A judge receiving anonymous evidence at midnight. Going outside the system. Interfering in an execution. You know how people will read that. So you sit with it. For 11 minutes, you sit with it. And then you do something you haven't done since your first year on the bench, when a case involving a 12-year-old made you pull over on the highway and just breathe. You let yourself feel it. Not the legal question. Not the procedural question. Not the career question. Just the human one. A man wakes up in 6 hours and walks a hallway he doesn't walk back from. And you are sitting at a kitchen table with information that may mean that walk was always the wrong one. 11 minutes. Then you pick up the phone. Your first call is to your clerk. She doesn't answer. It's midnight. Your second call is to the Chief Justice of your circuit. He answers on the third ring, voice rough with sleep, and the moment you say the words Marcus Hale and tomorrow morning, the roughness is gone. He listens. He doesn't interrupt. When you finish, there are 4 seconds of silence. Then he says, "Where did this come from?" You tell him you don't know. Another silence. Is it credible? You tell him you can't verify the USB contents independently at 12:20 in the morning, but the lab report is on letterhead you recognize, and the email chain uses names you know from that trial. He says, "You understand what you're asking?" You say you do. He says, "If this is real, we have an innocent man 6 hours from death. If this is fabricated, we have someone manipulating the judiciary at the highest level of desperation. Either way, I need to make calls." He hangs up. You sit. You wait. You do not pour the water. You do not move from the table. At 1:08 a.m., the governor's office calls you. Not the governor. A deputy counsel. Young voice. Very controlled. She asks you to describe the contents of the envelope in detail. You do. She asks if you've contacted anyone in the media. You tell her no. She asks if you've shared the USB contents with anyone other than the Chief Justice. You tell her no. She says, "We're convening an emergency review. We need you to remain available." You ask what that means for the timeline. She says, "That is what we are determining." She hangs up. While you wait, you open the trial transcript on your laptop. You kept a copy. You keep copies of everything. You read it differently now. Marcus Hale testified in his own defense. You remember thinking at the time that it was a risk. Juries don't always receive defendants well on the stand. But he was calm, consistent. He described the evening in detail. What he ate. What time he arrived at his girlfriend's apartment. A conversation they had about a television show. The sound of her neighbor's dog. The prosecution's cross-examination was efficient. They didn't try to shake the detail. They went after the girlfriend. She recanted on day 2 of trial. You read her testimony again. You read the recantation. She doesn't say he wasn't there. She says she can't be certain of the exact time he arrived. That's the recantation. That's what collapsed the alibi. Not that he lied, that she couldn't confirm the window precisely enough to exclude the crime. You read that 8 years ago and accepted it as the alibi falling apart. Now you read it again and you hear something else. You hear a woman who is terrified, who is choosing her words with the precision of someone who has been told exactly how far she can walk back without committing perjury, who is not lying, exactly, but is refusing to fully tell the truth. You wonder what she was told. You wonder who told her. At 2:33 a.m., the Chief Justice calls back. The lab report checks out. We've confirmed the letterhead and the lead analyst's credentials. The email chain is being verified now, but 2 names have already confirmed they recognize the thread. Your chest does something you weren't expecting. He continues. The governor is being briefed. The warden has been notified of a potential delay. Nothing is confirmed. We are not stopping anything yet. But we are not proceeding on schedule either. You ask about the defense team. They're being contacted. They've been working this case for years. Apparently they had a parallel investigation running, but couldn't get traction on the DNA challenge through official channels. You ask who sent the envelope. Long pause. We think it was someone inside the original prosecution. Someone who held it for 8 years and couldn't hold it anymore. It is 3:15 a.m. You are still at the table. The water is still untouched. And you are thinking about something you've never let yourself think about in 22 years on the bench. What if it wasn't just this one? You know the answer you're supposed to give. You know the statistical argument, the systemic argument, the institutional argument. You know how to hold the weight of those 41 verdicts in a way that doesn't crush you, because the system isn't perfect, but it is the best architecture human beings have built for the resolution of violence and harm. You know all of that, but you're not a system right now. You're a person at a kitchen table at 3:15 in the morning, and you are thinking about Marcus Hale at 34, looking at you like the verdict was weather. And you are thinking he knew. He knew in that moment that the truth was no longer the point, that something had already been decided, that the machine was going to do what the machine was going to do, and his job was simply to stand inside it. He wasn't defeated. He was already grieving, and you called that the look of a guilty man. At 4:02 a.m., the governor signs an emergency reprieve. Not an exoneration, not a reversal of conviction. A reprieve, a stop, a pause in which the truth is finally allowed to be examined in the light. Marcus Hale will not walk that hallway at 6 a.m. The defense team is already filing. The prosecution from 8 years ago is already retaining counsel. By the time morning news programs go live, there will be a story, and it will include your name. Not as a villain, not yet as a hero, as a judge who received an envelope at midnight and made a phone call. Here is what you need to understand about what comes next. Because people will tell you the story ends at 4:02 a.m. with the phone call and the signature and the reprieve. It doesn't. What comes next is months, possibly years. An investigation into the prosecution's conduct during the original trial. Depositions. A potential criminal referral for Brady violations. The analyst who flagged the DNA issue 8 years ago will testify. The girlfriend will be re-interviewed. The 2 eyewitnesses will be located. One has died. The other, when reached by investigators, will say something that makes the original detective's reports look very different in retrospect. The person who sent the envelope will eventually be identified. It will be a junior paralegal who worked in the DA's office at the time of the trial, who was 26 years old and chose a salary over a conscience and has been paying that price ever since. Who sent the envelope, she will say, because she couldn't sleep anymore. You understand that exactly. Marcus Hale will be exonerated 14 months after the reprieve. He will walk out of the facility on a Tuesday morning. He will be 50 years old by then, having entered at 34. He will have spent 16 years incarcerated for a murder the state no longer believes he committed. There will be a moment, you will see it on the news, where he steps through the door and stops. Just stops. And looks at the sky. For a long time, he just looks at the sky. You will watch that clip more times than you can count. Not because it makes you feel better. Because it is the only honest record you have of what it cost. Of what the gap between a clean case file and the actual truth looks like when it has a face and a body in 16 years and a man who looks at the sky like he's reintroducing himself to it. You retire 2 years after the exoneration. Not because you were forced to. Your conduct throughout the case, the midnight call, the refusal to bury the envelope, the willingness to act on what you found regardless of what it cost you, was reviewed and cleared. Several of your colleagues, in private, told you that you did the right thing, that they would have done the same. You don't know if that's true. You know what you were thinking for those 11 minutes before you picked up the phone. You know what the career calculation looked like in that window. You know that doing the right thing is a clean phrase for something that felt, in the moment, like standing at the edge of something with no railing. You retire because 42 verdicts is enough. Because you are no longer certain, as you once were, that certainty is something you should trust in yourself. Because Marcus Hale looked at the sky for a long time on a Tuesday morning, and you think that image deserves to be the last thing you carry out of that courtroom. Not the gavel. Not the robe. Not the 41 cases you got right. Just that. A man. A sky. 16 years returned to no one. And the question you will spend the rest of your life sitting with: how many other envelopes were never sent?